Hello, Internet friend. I'm David Ravel, and this is ValueSign for Wednesday, September 13. For all of our articles and podcasts, visit valuesign.com. Well, today, the Consumer Price Index, a deep dive into your wallet. Well, at precisely 8:30 this morning Eastern Time, the Bureau of Labor Statistics will release the most important economic report of the month, guaranteed to be the report that has the most impact on our financial well-being. It is the announcement of last month's change in consumer prices. As the cost of almost everything in our country is constantly rising, we consider this one of the best measures of inflation. Now, the index was created during the dark days of World War I. While American soldiers were overseas in Europe, food shortages and transportation issues began to appear back home in America. Food prices spiked, and the consumer income was being squeezed. Now, the Bureau of Labor Statistics recognized the problem and decided that there should be some way to compensate folks back home. They created the Food Price Index to measure the average family's cost of increase. It's interesting to note that merely by focusing the nation's attention on cost of food, it has helped farmers and regulators create the world's most productive agricultural sector. Even with today's high inflation, food prices remain under control until very recently. And even then, much of that rise in agricultural prices was really attributed to the rising cost of energy, as modern mechanized farms and food transportation are significant consumers of oil and gas. Now, the original Food Price Index has changed into the current Consumer Price Index, a basket of often purchased items for the average family. Today, the CPI, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is used, quote, to adjust income eligibility levels for government assistance, federal tax brackets, and federally mandated cost of living increases. Private sector wages and salaries increased, and consumer and commercial rent escalations. Now, the CPI affects the income of hundreds of millions of Americans. However, the CPI is no mere exercise in some faraway government agency. It is supposed to accurately measure how you and I spend our money. And taken as a whole, it should be a primary way to measure the effects of public policy. After all, it began 100 years ago as a measure of increasing food prices, and these results have led to changes in tax policy, agricultural policies, and government financial aid programs. So let's all put on our green eye shades and see if we can see what may be contributing to this current high inflation. We begin in January 2021, when Joe Biden was inaugurated as the 46th President of the United States, and we'll use the Bureau of Labor Statistics published CPI results as our source. Now, for 10 years before Biden assumed office, the highest level of inflation was back in September of 2011, when inflation rose by 4.2%. Now, that's a monthly reading, but it's an annualized rate. From the end of 2011, inflation never again reached 4% any time in the next 9 years. However, all that changed after the new president took over the reins. In a little over 3 months, inflation shot up to 4.25%, and a year after that, inflation was steaming ahead at more than 9%, a level not seen in this country in 40 years. Biden must have brought some new policies that caused prices to rise exponentially. Let's see if we can find out what's driving this inflation and what specific policies may have contributed. We begin with a review of medical costs. Were higher hospital and doctor costs driving these prices higher? Nope, not medical. Medical care was definitely not the cause. The highest jump in medical since 2021 has been just 5%, or about half of inflation's peak. Overall services in general have contributed little or no inflation. Neither the cost of automobiles nor the cost of clothing could either be considered a driver of overall higher prices. But if you review all the different categories of expenses for CPI, you'll find that only one type rose so much that it pushed inflation. And that category is energy, or more specifically, the price of gasoline. 8 different times since 2021, gasoline costs have risen by more than 47%. 47%. That ought to get our attention. The jump in gas prices has been so far from the average that they've really put a dent in our wallets. I remember last fall when the cost to fill up my SUV was more than $100. The first time that's ever happened. Granted, it has a large gas tank at 20 gallons, but when the gas price reaches $5 a gallon, the station says, "Pay me a C-note." So profound has this rise in gasoline prices been that if we took away the jump in gasoline alone, you would immediately reduce inflation by at least 2.5%. Now, what's worrying consumers today is the recent rise in the cost of gasoline and its derivative oil. In less than 3 months, West Texas Intermediate oil has risen from less than $70 a barrel to now nearly $90 a barrel. It's a rise of almost 30%, and something that's sure to hit us square in the pocketbook. Now perhaps we need less monetary tightening from the Fed and instead a better energy policy in our fight with inflation. And that's the value side for this Wednesday, September 13. For all of our articles and podcasts, visit valueside.com. I'm David Ravel. ValueSide is independently written and researched. The views expressed are strictly my own.